Hello and welcome to our second episode of TechPad. TechPad is a weekly 30-minute non-scripted talk show that takes place every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Sorry we got the stream started a little bit late. Kind of out of breath, been running around, trying to get backup encoders going. We had a couple issues, but nonetheless, my name is Jackson Staats, and this is our co-host, Blaze Smith.
Today we are going to be covering the Apple One M1 chip, what it is, why it matters, and why you, as the consumer, should care. All right, so
Cool.
To get started into it, what is it?
Oh, what is the Apple M1 chip? Glad you asked. Because the Apple M1 chip is really unlike anything I've ever seen before. I mean, it's really a very unique piece of technology that's just come out, and we thought we'd discuss it. It's a little bit of an older news topic, but it's still worthy of talking about. Essentially, all of the computers since ever, really, have used like processors from a company called Intel and AMD and some of those. And that's what Apple, the company, has been putting in all their laptops and desktops and all that stuff for many years. But recently, they've started transitioning to a thing they call Apple Silicon, the Apple M1. And that's where things get interesting, because Apple M1 is unlike any other processor that's on the market. We've never seen anything like this before. Have you heard anything about the Apple M1, Blaze?
I've heard a few things about it,
Yeah.
and before getting further, do you think the Apple Silicon, that name, will catch on, or do you think people...
So Apple Silicon is what Apple's really pressing hard for. It's tricky. I think because for a lot of the tech people, probably not, because it's based on ARM, so they're going to call it Apple ARM processors essentially.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to catch on for a lot of the other general consumers. Like a lot of people that are watching are probably going to start calling it Apple Silicon.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion, but
Yeah. All right, so back to what you asked me.
Back to the main topic. Yeah.
Back to the main topic. I've done a little bit of research about the M1 chip. I know that it will be running off the ARM architecture, and that means that apps will have to go through a transitional period.
Yeah.
From the x86 architecture.
Yeah, x86 is the CPU architecture that Apple's been using
Intel
for a really long time. Intel
runs
what
off.
they've been putting in there, and so they're transitioning to this new processor that has been fully optimized for Apple computers. It is built literally from the ground up to run Apple software, Apple applications, and it is fully optimized. Much like you've seen the iPhones and iPads and all of Apple's other devices, the apps are built specifically for the device. Android, for example, has a huge variety of different, phones.
Yeah,
Phones. Like, I mean, my phone's an S9, his is an S10. They both run different hardware. So apps have to be built to be compatible with all these phones. So essentially they run simulated on a virtual machine on all the different phones, which is why you can have like up to 16 gigabytes of memory, which is incredible. That's as much as a desktop computer in a phone. But since Apple is fully optimized, it's literally so much easier to build custom-made applications that run on less resources. For it. And that's what Apple is really trying to do, is they're trying to bring over all of the apps from iPad onto Mac and make the applications built for Mac a lot more native to the computer. So,
would these apps run better if they're native?
So that's the thing, is a lot of these apps, and we've seen this before with Apple when they transitioned to Intel in the first place, all of the existing applications were built for Intel. They have to be specifically made and built from the ground up almost for one processor or the other. And so what Apple has done is they've built a pretty interesting piece of software, right? I mean, it's called Rosetta 2.
Rosetta 2.
Yeah. I mean, do you know anything about Rosetta 2?
It's the second. It's not second version, but they're calling it Rosetta.
Well, call it second version.
Well, Rosetta 1 was from 2006.
Yeah, way back there.
From switching from where Apple went from PowerPC to Intel.
That transition was horrible, by the way. That's why I'm hoping the transition from Intel to ARM, Apple Silicon, will be a lot better. And so far, it's good. I mean, let's see, when did they release the first Apple M1 chips? I mean,
2020, was it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
2020.
So that's the thing, is they announced it way back in 2020 in the Worldwide Developer Conference. I remember watching it because I was taking a summer certification course, through the school, being an Apple certified technician. And one of our assignments was to watch WWDC. And I remember very vividly that this was a huge announcement because it means that you can now buy a cheaper Mac that has more performance than the Intel counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that brings us back to our other topic about performance.
Yeah.
How do apps that are built for Intel perform on our computers, like the Mac, Apple M1?
So they run. So, going to be comparing the MacBook and the MacBook. Yeah, just MacBook Intel to MacBook M1.
Yeah.
So the M1 chip, it's cheaper, so you would expect, or I would expect it to be less quality.
Yeah.
When it comes to how they run, but apparently
so less performance.
The benchmarks for the M1 chip and the Intel are that M1 beats out Intel by quite a lot.
Yeah.
Across all.
Yeah, but that's the catch, is that developers have to integrate support directly into the Apple. They have to integrate support for Apple Silicon on their applications, like Microsoft Office. It's made by Microsoft, so probably Microsoft might be a little hesitant to develop a Apple specific piece of software. But that's where Rosetta 2 that we talked about earlier comes in. It will transcribe, I guess is the right word, more like recompile the program on install. So as an end user, you can go to the App Store on a Mac and download any application. I mean, for iPhones, for iPads, for Macs, and it will download on your computer. But if it hasn't been optimized for Apple M1, Rosetta 2, while installing, without any developer interference, will emulate or recompile the program for the Apple M1. And we have an Apple M1 Mac Mini in the studio, because from what we've seen online and from the benchmarks, it is very fast. The Mac Mini, you can buy like a Micro Center off the store for $500-600, which is unheard of for a Mac. And it will outperform computers of like double the price, like $1,000. And one of our in-house editors actually was editing off of it for a couple of months. But editing on it, using it for a couple of months, is where the issues started to pop up. Right. Memory was one of them.
The storage or the RAM?
The RAM, the short-term memory of the computer. Yeah. And there's a lot of, I'm sure you've heard of it, there's a lot of controversy over only having 8 gigs of RAM in the new M1 chips.
Yeah, it's very limited at the moment.
Yeah, but is it? I mean...
Well, the RAM itself they have it limited to like 8 gigabytes or 16.
You can upgrade 16.
16. Yeah. And it's not, you yourself cannot upgrade. You have to send it in or buy just a product with 16 gigabytes.
Yeah.
That brings it to the SSD storage.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy. I mean, I've seen on Twitter, people complaining like, I couldn't live with a laptop with only 8 gigs of memory. But that's one of the ways that Apple M1 is different from anything we've ever seen in the tech world, because memory is sort of a different concept for the Apple M1.
Yeah.
In previous years, like with the Windows PC, I mean, you have Windows PCs have traditionally had a lot of memory.
Yeah.
You know, like two terabytes up to with Windows 10 Pro.
Yeah.
Which is insane. I don't know why anybody would need that unless you're running a server, but you can do it. Because all of the short-term memory, all of the applications that we're running were stored in RAM.
Yeah.
But with Apple M1, this is completely different. Yes, a lot of things are stored in RAM, but it uses the SSD, the hard drive, which is blazingly fast, to use as RAM. Which is why when you're using a 8 gigabyte model of the M1, why it never gets to full RAM usage, because it just keeps filling up that almost infinite supply of hard drive space.
Yeah.
So
even though you can't upgrade RAM, you can just opt for a higher SSD storage.
It is true. And that's what a lot of people do, is if you want to, I guess we should talk about that next, the tiers, but it's the same price to go to double your storage as it is to double your RAM. Which in past, it was worth it to double your RAM, in my opinion. But now it's sort of changed. Have you been to the Apple's website? And these chips, they're just a year old. This transition period is only going to be 5 years, I think. Was that right? Am I remembering that right?
It's going to be a
5 years?
Short period of time.
Yeah, it's very short. So Apple already has these chips on the market. You can already buy them. We already have one in our studio. What devices can you buy with the M1 chip in it?
So the M1 chip, so you can get MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, pretty much.
Yeah, the 13-inch,
and 16-inch, I believe.
Not the 16.
Not the 16.
Yeah,
That's
they haven't transitioned
Intel for now.
Yeah.
And then Mac Mini.
Yeah, so the Mac Mini, MacBook Pro 13-inch, and the MacBook Air, and the smaller of the two iMacs.
Not the MacBook.
Not the 24-inch one.
Yeah, that's still
the small one. Which really brings us to, who are these devices for? Who would really be interested in all of this, buying an Apple computer with a new, yet-to-be-tested reliability, But in theory, very fast. Who's this for? Is your type of work the kind of work that...
Well, I'm not going to be... Well, most of my work is just school work and just pretty normal work. Yeah. It's not very intensive.
Yeah, you're not video editing,
No, I'm not video editing. Maybe a little bit photo editing, but that doesn't take up much. Yeah. It doesn't really take its toll on the computer.
Would you buy an Apple M1?
Yeah. I would buy an Apple M1. For right now, it's been tested. I feel like it's been tested enough since it's been released in the MacBook Pro 13-inch.
Yeah.
So I haven't heard too many problems about it.
Yeah.
So I would.
But you're a PC user right now.
I am. I've always been a PC user.
So essentially what you're saying is that because of the increased optimization, the increased speed, and the increased or decreased power usage, as well as macOS, that this is enough to bring you from Windows into Apple.
For a laptop. Well, if the new MacBook Air only had an Intel, I don't see a point why I wouldn't purchase something that's like a Dell or Asus laptop for schoolwork. But with the M1, since it's exceeds the performance of pretty much all of their Intel i5 and i7.
Yeah. So would you say that it performs at the same, because traditionally there's been an Apple tax, it's been hard. Some people think, it's expensive, which it is. Apple devices are not cheap. It's too expensive for what you get. Would you agree that this makes it a better value?
It does by quite a lot.
Yeah. I would say so for the desktop Mac Mini.
Well, that's pretty.
But you're looking for the MacBook Air. You're looking at that as a switching over for schoolwork.
Yeah.
So you think it's a good value?
I think it is a good value. The price is always going to be a problem, I think, with Apple. And that kind of brings us into the M1X, that they're definitely going to bump the price.
Yeah. So that's what the leaked name is. This is none of this.
Name.
The M1X is not official. In theory, because Apple manufactures this chip. This is their very own chip. So they can design it however they want, which is really, I mean, this has only been seen a couple times in the industry.
It gives them a lot of freedom.
Yeah. What do you think caused this transition to Apple? I mean, why is Apple starting to manufacture their own chips?
I think that the shortage might have had a small part in that. Yeah. I think there was more part.
Yeah, I would agree that since it's hard to get chips right now of any sort, the car industry sees this.
Yeah.
Any PC builders out there, PCMR guys will know this from the GPU shortage.
Yeah.
But I would say it goes back a lot. You're right. But I would say it even goes a little farther back.
Yeah.
From when Intel really, made a joke of themselves with the MacBook, not the MacBook Air, not the MacBook Pro. This is an older device. This is a couple years, like 5-6 years ago.
It's back there.
It's back there. When they had a device that was in between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, price-wise. So $1,200, I think. But it was a very small, smaller than the MacBook Air, very thin, ultralight MacBook that Intel had promised to deliver a very power efficient, very cool running chip that Apple could use in these super tiny, this like paper thin laptop. Mm-hmm. But it turned out to be garbage. It was really bad. Apple had a fair bit to play in the laptop being bad. The keyboards were bad. Arguably, all the butterfly keyboards were bad, but the motherboards died, the ports died, and the chips died because there's no way to cool them because it was so tiny. They just ran at 100 degrees Celsius all the time and burned up, which was not at all what Intel had promised, until the company had promised in their chips. And it didn't perform. You couldn't even open up a Chrome tab. Like it was a brick from the time you got it, a $1,200 aluminum brick, which is disappointing in its entirety. Speaking of which, Apple M1 could change that.
It could.
You could literally, since it draws so little power, you could shrink. You could make a very, in Apple's unnecessary, that's what I would call it, unnecessary pursuit of thinness. I don't know why it needs to be. I don't know why you have to have a paper thin laptop. It's nice, but
there's
nobody asked for a paper thin app. Like a good example of this is the new iMac with the M1 chip. It's so thin that it didn't have room for an aux, like a headphone jack on the back. So they had to move it to the side to plug it in. I'm surprised they kept it at all, given the route that the iPhones have taken. But you have to plug it in the side. Like, who asked?
It's a desktop.
For a ultra thin desktop.
I'm not going to be moving it around every day.
Maybe putting it on the desk once.
Maybe.
And I'm not caressing my, like, ooh, it's so thin. I'm not carrying it around,
It's going to be back against the wall. You're not going to be seeing the side of it very often. Just make it thinner.
But, that would be excellent. It makes me think, and I wouldn't be entirely surprised that they would bring back the MacBook. And this was a dream computer for a lot of people. Something that was very small, maybe for even you, like if it was for school. It's just so light, so easy just to, whip out and start going on homework. Maybe the M1 can make a difference, total difference in the laptop industry.
Yeah.
Which we've already seen. The battery life is incredible.
Yeah.
The MacBook Pro, what was it, 24-hour battery life tested?
It's like 20.
20?
More realistically, more around 20 hours.
20 hours of battery. Imagine going the entire week of school without plugging in your laptop. That's where And you can do that. That's an option now with the MacBook Pro. You have to pay a little bit of money for it, of course, but you can.
Yeah, and compared to the Air, Air's like 13 to, I don't know. Tested is more around 13.
Which is crazy because some people are like, well, you might as well get the MacBook Air, get the extra battery life, get the extra performance. But do you really need 20 hours of battery life?
I mean
really?
I mean, it's nice, but for the most part, for an average person, they're going to be within range of a outlet. Like there's an outlet here.
There's like 4 in
There's
this room.
4. Just plug it in.
Yeah.
Just plug it in.
Wireless charging.
I mean, you're not going to be walking and working on homework at the same time.
Well, I guess I've done it before, but
It's one hand typing on a keyboard.
Doing the homework while the teacher's collecting it. That's an extreme sport right there.
That's an extreme sport. Yes, it is.
Speaking of performance, there are 2 tiers of the Apple M1 actually. There's the lower end. I'd say this in heavy quotes because they're both awesome. They both outperform anything in this class. And then the high end, which is interesting because there's only 2 devices. Yeah.
I thought, did the iPad get the M1 chip incorporated?
It did. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
You can now buy the iPad Pro, which I don't know why you would buy an Apple iPad Pro with a desktop class processor in it. You can do it now.
You can do it.
I don't know why you would, but you can. I completely forgot about the iPad. Yeah.
It has a very good camera on the iPad too.
Yeah. So
compared to the
it does.
face cam.
Yeah, the 720p webcam. So yeah, that's kind of crazy. But essentially the only difference between those 2 tiers is one GPU graphics processing core.
Yeah. The CPU still has 8 cores.
Yeah. And you can only find these on 2. I don't know why Apple still makes these. Maybe they're just a lower quality chip, so they just disable a core.
But why would they just keep the 8-core GPU or upgrade it to?
Because you can only get it in 2 devices.
Yeah.
This lower end M1, the base model MacBook Air, and the base model iMac.
Why wouldn't they just make it obsolete and just fully transition to the 8-core CPU and 8-core GPU?
Yeah. Well, I have no idea. I feel like it's probably, and we can see this, there's been teardowns of the new iMac M1. Maybe it's heat output.
Yeah.
Because the iMac base model only has 1 cooling fan.
The Air just only has...
And the Air only has 0 cooling fan. It's passive. Which is interesting because, and people complain about this, it may decrease your performance to have more running the chip hotter.
Yeah. But longevity might increase. Well, there's no air going into it.
We still haven't... The durability of these M1 devices has not quite been tested.
I mean, they're relatively new, so...
Yeah, they're relatively new. I can say with confidence, more or less, I guess that's where Apple is right now. I can say with confidence, more or less, that when I open my MacBook Pro, it's going to turn on.
Yeah.
It hasn't a couple times because of some weird T2 security stuff, but I can say this is a tested laptop. I've been using it as my daily driver forever. But, I mean, what's the durability like for these new M1 devices that have the M1 chip in it?
I mean, it's really hard to get a real test of them if they've only been out for such a short time. And with the T2, it's more been integrated into the M1 chip.
Yeah.
So
and for those who don't know, the Apple T2 chip is a security chip that was built into Apple devices for a long time.
For the
security
Intel
chip for Intel processors. And that's really what's special about the M1. Is everything on the computer has been moved to this one single chip, which is incredible. It's just one little tiny chip. I mean, this is the future.
The future.
The memory is built right into the CPU. So is the GPU. The SSD is like that close. You know, I mean, it is so compact and so power efficient that I wouldn't be surprised if more companies started trying to integrate
the M1.
ARM like architecture, custom processors instead of buying them from another company, which is what the industry has been doing forever. One notable exception is Microsoft, and I believe their Surface laptop, tablet kind of thing that ran Windows, where they tried out an ARM thing, and it didn't work out at all. It was a terrible computer because nothing ran on ARM because they didn't have the software infrastructure to translate these applications over to a form that the computer can read.
Like Rosetta.
Yeah, like Rosetta.
Apple created.
Yeah. So who should buy these computers? We're going to change the topic a little bit. We're kind of running a little low on time.
Okay. I mean, it depends. I know we say
Obviously,
that, but
you're a student,
it always
right?
depends. Yeah. For like MacBook Air, there's an educational discount. It's not a gigantic discount, but it's a little bit.
It's there.
It's there.
Yeah, it exists, yeah.
It's not non-existent.
Yeah.
But as a student, I believe it would be a good option because the price is higher than other laptops that you could purchase, but the M1 offers a lot higher. What is it?
Performance.
Performance. Performance. So for school, you're not doing really intensive stuff. MacBook Air would work out great. And then, sorry.
No, go ahead.
All right. And then even if you are doing really intensive editing, you can always get the upgraded M1s. Yeah. That have higher storage, higher RAM.
And the MacBook Pro that has a cooling fan. And for somebody like me, as a media manager for the local TV station, this is the dream device for me. Because I do a ton of upload, like a ton of just web browsing and processing on the internet, But I also do, on occasion, a lot of rendering video, to meet our standards here at the television station. And I have a base model MacBook Pro. Yeah. It is slow.
It's very base.
It is a very base. And it is very slow, sort of poor battery life. That sort of thing. So it's a dream computer for me. Video editors, we have an in-house video editor. It wasn't quite fast enough for her. So if you're doing super intensive video editing, I'd wait. I'd wait for Apple to come out with a better processor and all that sort of stuff. And really this computer, that's the thing. It makes sense for everybody. And I guess that's, Apple in one. Makes sense for everybody. So, with that, in our last 20 seconds here, at least for Channel 8, thank you for watching TechPad. This is our second episode, so thanks for watching. My name is Jackson Staats, and this is Blaze Smith. We would like to thank you for watching TechPad. We'll be on air next week at 6 p.m. So, the Channel 8 people, thanks for watching. And for the rest of you online,
we will update
because we're off air on Channel 8 now. So
the topics we usually.
Yep, we've come out with a whole list of topics. Hopefully, we get a little bit better because that's why we're doing it. It's for the entertainment value for us and the educational, learning how to do streaming for us. Yes. Hopefully, you learned something from TechPad too. We have a whole list of topics. I might post it on the internet somewhere that we're going to be covering from this week forward, every Wednesday at 6. So I hope to see you guys there. Any closing words?
Just hope you had some fun watching us.
Yeah. Well, that about wraps it up for TechPad. So I thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.